Well, they're not denying it. That's the first point. Second point, they say their accounts for the last year are accurate. They're not defending their accounts of previous years when they missed this entirely. And they say they're in discussions with HMRC. If HMRC thought I had not declared 934 million, I bet they'd be having discussions with me. Most people would call that an investigation, and that's what I believe is happening. They seem to have made a bunch of, let's be generous and call them mistakes related to this scandal. The biggest is they paid about £140 million in compensation to postmasters, actual cash compensation. But in their accounts, they booked a provision of at one point 934 million, and they took that as a tax deduction. Now, you can't get a tax deduction for illegal and unlawful activities. Persecuting postmasters wasn't a legitimate part of their business. It's not a legitimate business expense. So they should not have taken that deduction.
I just don't understand why we're even in a world where somebody at the post office, whoever was in their accounts team, thought in any world it was possible to write off illegal activity as a business expense. How do you think that could have happened?
I don't think there's any question you can ask about the post office that starts how, when I can give you an answer. How did they think it was right to suddenly accuse 4,000 postmasters of theft? Why did they think they'd suddenly become so dishonest? Why did they cover up the evidence? Why did they conduct the litigation in such an unpleasant way for so many years to try and draw it out? I have no answers to any of these questions. But here's another question. So the postmasters were forced to repay the shortfalls they were accused of stealing, which of course they hadn't. What happened to those amounts? Did the post office pay tax on them? Bet they didn't. What about all the expenses of persecuting the postmasters at the time, the prosecutions? That shouldn't have been tax deductible, but they claimed it as tax deductible, and on it goes. And I expect if HMRC looked at this in detail, which they should, they'd find a huge amount of tax underpaid over the last 5, 10, 20 years.
Now, I mean, the Post Office has issued the following statement saying the disclosed information on taxation in the Post Office's annual report and accounts for 2022-23 published on the 20th of December is appropriate and accurate. Discussions with HMRC and the Department of Business continue. What do we read into that? Are they just sort of stonewalling this? Are they just refusing to engage with it?
Well, they're not denying it. That's the first point. Second point, they say their accounts for the last year are accurate. They're not defending their accounts of previous years when they missed this entirely. And they say they're in discussions with HMRC. If HMRC thought I had not declared 934 million, I bet they'd be having discussions with me. Most people would call that an investigation, and that's what I believe is happening.
Right. And is this something you would like to see the Treasury pick up next week?
It would be good if, given that the post office is owned by the government, given that the cost of this is ultimately going to be borne by us poor taxpayers, if the government could reveal exactly what is going on and who at the post office will be taking responsibility.
Now, there's some talk as well. If they are facing this £100 million tax bill, is this going to potentially make them insolvent? I mean, could this just completely bring down the post office?
I mean, the sad fact is the post office has been insolvent ever since this started. They're only still in existence because the government keeps handing them out money to pay the compensation. All of us are paying for the costs of this scandal, and I'm sure that will continue. The post office isn't going to shut up shop anytime soon. It will just be yet more money from the taxpayers keeping this failed business going.
And what about the argument that Fujitsu should cough up some money for the compensation scheme? What do you think of that?
We've been looking into that and we'll be speaking about that and writing about that soon. I'm not going to say anything more just now, if that's okay.
Okay. Watch this space. ... And final question: we had some announcement quite a big announcement in the Commons this week. A new law to exonerate and compensate some of the postmasters and mistresses. What do you make of the scheme that was announced?
As a lawyer, it makes me sad. More than sad, it makes me appalled that instead of people being cleared in courts, looking at their individual case, we have an act of parliament which cheats and magically exonerates them. Sadly, I think it's the only thing that could be done, because by now, going through the normal processes would take 15 years or more. So I don't like that it's being done this way, but this is the best option we have.
And are you satisfied that this new sort of bit of the compensation story? I mean, you and I have spoken before where you have been highlighting just how complicated and how difficult it is for people to get compensation. I think you tweeted this week at the optic of a form, and my goodness, it looked kind of mind-bogglingly complicated. Are you satisfied that this new iteration of the compensation scheme will be swift and accessible and easy for people?
So far, they've been talking about compensation for convicted postmasters, which is actually the minority. The 2,000 or more in what's called the HSS compensation scheme, who weren't ever convicted, that I think remains deeply unsatisfactory. That's the form that you looked at. I was a senior lawyer in one of the largest firms in the world for 25 years. I would not fill in that form without advice from a specialist, but these postmasters in their 70s and 80s were being asked to do that without any legal advice at all. It's a travesty.